Hello everybody and welcome back to week 2 of our Christmas gingerbread crochet along. I really hope you enjoyed working through week 1. If you haven't finished yet, I just want to remind you straight off the bat, there's no pressure at all to keep up with these weekly videos. They're just going to be here waiting for you as and when you get to this stage. We're going to talk through what we're going to be learning and making this week, and when you're ready to make along with me, our video is here and you can watch it back as many times as you need to as well. So for week 2, we are starting with our Christmas jumper panels. We're moving on colour-wise way and we're really focusing on our green palette this week. So you've got 2 green shades in your blanket and we're going to be using both of them. We're going to be making 2 panels in emerald, and then we're going to be making another 2 panels in our gentle jade. So later on, when we come to join everything together, these will form a large square around the outside of our blanket. We're going to be repeating some of the skills we learnt in week 1. So we're going to be using our lovely fan stitch and then squaring that off. We'll also then be doing some simple trebles like we learnt in week 1, and we're going to be introducing 2 new stitches. One is the V stitch, which forms our lovely sort of chevron pattern, which really reminds me of the yoke of a sweater or a Christmas jumper. And we're also going to be bringing in a puff stitch, which just adds a little pop of colour along the centre of both of our panels. And again, just to give those 2 colourways a little bit of a different twist, we're going to be using golden against the gentle jade, and we're going to be using bright lemon against the emerald colour. So you're going to need quite a few different colours this week. All 4 of the panels will start with your very soft pink, your peaches colour, and then we'll be using emerald, gentle jade, our cream again, and then either golden or bright lemon as our pop of colour, depending on which of those 2 colourways you're working up. But as we work through the week, you'll see exactly what you need to use and wear, and it's also all laid out in your pattern for you. In terms of construction, each one of those panels is worked back and forth in rows and is a standalone unit. So we'll be making 4 in total, 2 of each colourway, and I found that this is really like nice palette cleanser. After working in the round we did for week 1, we're back to rows again. And they're the perfect panels, I think, for doing a little bit, maybe in front of the TV, get into a rhythm, and they're very repetitive in terms of their stitch pattern repeat. So we can find some nice meditative processes working through that together. So the first colour you'll need is your peaches. Grab your hook and let's get started on week 2 together. So the first colour we're going to need for week 2 is our peaches colour. And we're going to begin with a chain of 100, so a nice even number. Now for the purposes of the video, I am going to make a slightly smaller swatch, but we're still going to work through all of the stitches and all of the rows together. So if mine doesn't look like it's 100, then it's because it's a little bit shorter. But go ahead and make your chain and then meet me back here for the first row. So once you have got your chain of 100, we're going to begin the first row, and we're going to start by making 1 treble in the 4th chain from the hook. So if you remember, we never count the chain that's on the hook. So instead, we're going to look at the 1, 2, 3, 4th chain from the hook here. So we're going to yarn over for our treble into that 4th chain from the hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. And that missed chain 3 there does count as a treble in our counting for this row. We're then going to make 1 treble in each of the next 96 chains. So that's pretty much all the way to the end, working 1 treble in each chain along. So yarning over and inserting, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Carry on in this way until you've reached the end of your row. You should have 98 trebles, remembering to include that initial chain 3 that we skipped in your stitch count. So once you reach the end of your first row, as I said, your swatch will be longer than mine, but we'll each have worked 1 treble in each chain along, and you should have 98 stitches. So we're now ready to turn our work to work row 2. And we're going to begin with a chain 1, which counts as a double crochet. In the next stitch, we're going to work a double crochet. We're then going to miss 2 stitches and work 7 trebles in the stitch after that. We're then going to miss another 2 stitches. And if you take a look at your pattern, you'll see that we then want to repeat from the start to the start 14 more times. So if we go back to where we first see the star in our pattern, it's before the double crochet. So just as we were doing for the border of week 2, we are working 1 double crochet, we're missing 2 stitches, we're working 7 trebles in the next, missing 2 stitches, and that is our little stitch pattern repeat for the rest of the row. So carry on repeating that 14 times, and join me back here after the 14th repeat to work through the end of the row together. You should have 2 trebles that we're going to skip, and then we're going to work the final double crochet into the top of the first stitch. So that was that 3 chain that we made at the beginning. Well, as I said, mine is shorter. I've only got 4 fans, but the same process will apply after you've worked all your stitches. At the end of the second row, we can also fasten off our yarn, as we're going to start with a different colour for the next row. So we're going to yarn over to slip stitch, pull that through the stitch on the hook, cut your yarn, leaving a tail end, and then pull that all the way through. So for the beginning of the third row, we first want to turn our work, and we're then going to bring in our emerald colour. Once you've got your emerald, we're going to find that double crochet that we made at the end of the previous row and insert our hook. We can then yarn over with emerald, and we're going to start this row with a chain 3. So now that we've got our emerald on our hook, we're going to chain 3 in the top of that double crochet. Just as we did when we were completing week 1, we're going to now fill in the sort of dips of our fan shapes by working 4 treble together and then 7 trebles together. But let's work through it together again. Because we've got our chain 3 here, we're going to work a 3 treble together over the next 3 stitches. So we're going to yarn over, insert into the first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 only. We're going to do that again into the next stitch, yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. And a third time, yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through 2 only. We should now have 4 loops on our hook, and we can yarn over and pull through all of those together to create a 3 treble together. We then want to chain 3 and work 1 double crochet into the top of our fan. Chain 2, and then we can work 7 trebles together. So yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 only. So we're going to do that once, twice, 3 times. The 4th time should be into that double crochet in the middle. 5, 6, and 7. When you've got your 7 trebles half made, you should have 8 loops on your hook, and we can yarn over and pull through all of them. So once you've pulled through all of those loops and created the 7 treble together, we can then chain 3. And just as we did in the previous week, that is now going to be our little stitch pattern repeat all the way along till the end of the row. So we're working a double crochet into the top of the fan and chain 2, a 7 treble together over the next 7 stitches, yarning over and pulling through all of those loops, and then a chain 3. And that little stitch pattern repeat is then going to be repeated 14 more times until you reach the sort of top peak of the very last fan. So continue in that way, repeating that little sequence of stitches so that we are rounding off or flattening off our curves with our 7 trebles together in that combination. And I will meet you at the end of the row, or at the end of the last fan on your row, and we will just work through the very end of the row together. I've now reached the end of my slightly shorter sample, that once you've repeated yours 14 more times, we'll both be at the same stage together. So we want to work 1 double crochet into the top of the last fan, chain 3, and then we want to work a 4 treble together over the next 3 trebles and 1 double crochet. We should then have 1 stitch left to work into. I'm going to work 1 treble in that last stitch, and then we're ready to turn for the next row. So for row 4, we're keeping emerald on our hook, so we don't need to make any colour changes, and doing a really nice simple row here of making trebles into the tops of all of our stitches. So we're going to start with a chain 3. Then we're going to make a treble into the top of the 4 treble together. Two trebles into the chain space. And then if we take a look at the pattern together, we hit a star at this point. So we know now we're entering to a little stitch pattern repeat. We want to make 1 treble into the top of the double crochet, 2 treble into the chain space, a treble into the top of the 7 treble together, and then 2 trebles into the chain space. And we want to repeat from star to star 14 more times. So that should take us all the way to the end of the row. Once you've repeated those instructions 14 more times, we'll find ourselves at this point here where we've got 1 double crochet, a chain and our 3 treble together left. So we're going to make 1 treble into the top of the double crochet, 2 treble into the chain space, so we've made 1 treble into the top of the double crochet, 2 treble into the chain space, and then we want to make 1 final treble into the top of that chain 3 that we made at the start. So that at the end of the 4th row, we should have 98 trebles. For our 5th row, we're again using our emerald. I'm going to start with a chain 3, which counts as a stitch. And we're then going to make 97 trebles. So essentially we're making 1 treble in each stitch along. So continue doing that, working 1 treble in each stitch along until you reach the end of row 5, at which point you should have 98 stitches. So join me back here at the end of the row where we're going to fasten off our emerald colour and we're going to introduce our next colour and our next stitch. So once you've made your last treble into the top of the last stitch of the row, we need to fasten off yarn F. So I'm going to yarn over and slip stitch, cut the yarn leaving a tail end, and then pull through to complete the slip stitch. We can then turn our work ready to start the 6th row. And for the 6th row, we are going to need Gentle Jade. And we want to begin by attaching yarn C to the final treble of the previous row. So that's this one here. We're going to insert our hook into the top of the stitch and yarn over. Again, always leaving ourselves a long enough tail end to weave in. We then want to chain 3 to start the round, and this does count as a stitch. And we're going to, for this row, now be working in a really nice V-stitch pattern. So to begin with, we're going to miss 1 treble. So this chain 3 here already counts as having worked into this stitch. We're going to miss the next stitch, and then into the stitch after that, we're going to work a treble, a chain 1, and then a treble into that same stitch again. And if you take a look at your pattern, you'll see that those instructions are in brackets, and that's indicating to us that we want to make them all into the same stitch. So we've done a treble, a chain 1 and a treble into that stitch. We then want to miss 2 stitches, skip the next 2, and then our pattern says we want to repeat from star. So that's our little stitch pattern repeat. We're skipping 2, and then we're going to repeat again. So we're going to make a treble, a chain 1 and a treble into the next stitch, and then skip 2 more stitches. a treble, a chain 1 and a treble, and skip 2 stitches. And you're going to repeat that all the way along until you have 3 trebles left. So continue making your V-stitches and join me when you are very nearly at the end of your row. So as you near the end of your row and you've worked a treble, a chain 1 and a treble, and you've skipped 2, we should then have 3 stitches left. So we're going to work a treble, a chain 1 and a treble. We're then going to skip 1 stitch, and into our very last stitch, which is this chain 3, we're going to work a treble. So at the end and at the beginning of our row we had sort of a treble and we skipped 1, but then after each V-stitch we skipped 2. At the end of row 6 we can fasten off yarn C with a slip stitch, so yarn over and pull through for the slip stitch, cut your yarn and then pull through to fasten off. We're then going to turn our work and we're going to bring in our next colour, which is going to be our cream colour. For rows 7 and 8, we are pretty much doing what we've just done here with the V-stitches, but they're going to be even easier for us to see where to work. So to begin with, after having turned your work, we're going to attach our cream coloured yarn by inserting into the top of the last treble of the previous row, yarning over, pulling up a loop. We're then going to start with a chain 3. We now want to skip a treble and make 1 treble, chain 1 and 1 treble into the next chain 1 space. So here's what that's going to look like. We're going to yarn over and we're going to go into the middle of that V-stitch and we're going to make a treble, a chain 1 and a treble. And we're going to repeat that little section all the way along. So we're going to find the next chain 1 space, yarn over, and we're going to do a treble, a chain 1 and a treble. And we're going to repeat that all the way along until you work into the very last V-stitch. So carry on in this way, placing your cream V-stitches directly into the centre of your gentle jade ones. It's really easy for us now to see where we're working. And it's a really nice sort of methodical stitch to see us through to the end of the row, where I will meet you back to talk through finishing the row and bringing in our next colour. So you join me back here at the end of the 7th row, and if we take a little look at our pattern, we've worked 1 treble, chain 1, 1 treble into the next chain 1 space, and then we've repeated from the start to the very last stitch. So the only stitch we've got left now to work is this chain 3 here, and into that we're going to work 1 treble into the top of it. And again, at the end of this row, we're going to be breaking our yarn and changing colour. So yarn over for a slip stitch, cut your yarn and pull through to complete the slip stitch. We're then going to turn our work, and for the 8th row, we're bringing back in our gentle jade. But other than the colour change, it's going to be a direct repeat of what we did on the 7th row. So we're going to attach gentle jade into the top of the last treble on the previous row. chain 3, and then we're going to work treble, chain 1 and a treble into the chain 1 space below. So again, just as we did on the previous row, repeat from start in your pattern, so from that little stitch, repeat all the way along until the last stitch. So continue, and I will meet you at the end of row 8, where we will look at the next stage together. As you reach the end of row 8, you should have 1 stitch left to work into after making the final 1 treble, chain 1, 1 treble into the chain 1 space below. So again, we're going to make 1 treble into the top of that chain 3 to finish our row. And again, if we look at our next row, we're going to be bringing back in our emerald colour, so we can yarn over to slip stitch, cut our gentle jade and pull through to complete that slip stitch. So turn your work ready to start row 9. For row 9, we're bringing back in our emerald colour, and we're going to attach it to the final treble of the previous row, just like we have for the last couple of rounds, or the last couple of rows I should say. Yarn over and pull up a loop. We're then going to chain 3, and our instructions for the 9th row are to make 3 trebles into the next chain space and then repeat from star until the last stitch. So we're going to do that all the way along. So that's 3 trebles into the first chain space, and then we're going to repeat that all the way along, making 3 trebles into each chain space until you reach the last one. Carry on in this way, and I'll meet you at the end of row 9. So once you've repeated from star all the way until the last stitch, we can then work 1 treble into the top of the final chain 3. And we're going to keep emerald on our hook for row 10, sorry. So no need to break it here. Instead, we're just going to turn ready to start row 10. So for row 10, we are going to also be bringing in another colour. So the other colour we're going to need for this row is our yellow colour, bright lemon. See if this one, this one's playing ball. We don't need it just yet, but just have it to hand so that it's ready. And for the base colour of this row, we're still going to be using emerald, but because it's a 2 colour row, a little bit like we did last week, we've used letters after the stitches to indicate what colour you should be using. Right, let's work through it together. It's also worth noting that this is a wrong side row. So it hasn't really mattered previously in this week, but because we're going to be doing a puff stitch, we want our puff stitch to puff out onto the front of the work. So it's just worth noting this is a wrong side, and I'll show you how we're going to manage our yarns in that way. So we'll begin our 10th row with a chain 3 in our emerald colour. And then we're going to make 5 trebles in emerald. And we just want to be aware that at the end of the 5th treble, that's when we're going to be changing colour. But for now, we've got our chain 3, which counts as a stitch here. I'm going to make 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So on the last yarn over of that stitch, we're going to bring in our bright lemon. So again, leaving ourselves a nice tail end, and remembering that this is the wrong side row, so we want to leave any tail ends sitting on this side. We're also not going to be breaking our emerald colour, we're just going to leave that attached for now. So yarn over with bright lemon and pull through, which is completing that 5th treble for us. So we're now ready with bright lemon on our hook in order to work our puff stitch in the next stitch here. So to make our puff stitch, we're going to first yarn over, and then we're going to insert into the stitch. We're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. But when you pull up your loop, we want to make sure that we're pulling it up to the same height as the treble stitches next to it. So it's kind of an exaggerated yarn over. And we're going to repeat that 4 more times. So yarn over, insert into the same stitch, yarn over and pull up a tall loop. Third time, a 4th time, and a 5th time. We're then going to bring the bright lemon to the front of our work, and we're going to pick up that emerald that we left, and we're going to use the emerald to yarn over and pull through all of the loops on our hook to complete the puff stitch. So I'm just going to make the next stitch before I cut this yarn, just because in order to sort of tighten up our puff stitch there, it's good to carry on and just make the next stitch. So after our puff stitch in bright lemon, we then want to make 11 trebles in emerald. So this is our next stitch we're going to work into. So I'm just going to make the first of those 11 trebles. And we are going to break the bright lemon yarn at this point. So just cut it, leaving yourself a nice tail end to weave in. And if we have a little look at the pattern together, you'll see that we've got a star before our 11 trebles in emerald. So we make 11 trebles in emerald and then a puff stitch in bright lemon, and we want to repeat from star to star 6 more times. Now because I'm working on a shorter swatch, I've got space to repeat that 1 more time, but you'll be repeating that 6 more times across the length of your row. So as I said, I've made the first treble of my 11 trebles, so I'm going to make 10 more. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And on the 11th one, I'm going to colour change on the final yarn over, just as we did before. Bringing in bright lemon and allowing our tail ends to all sit on this side of the work. Tuck those tail ends out of the way for a second. And we're going to make our puff stitch in this next stitch. So yarn over and insert into the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. But remembering to make our puff stitch really effective, we're pulling up a tall loop just until we get to the same height as our treble stitches next to it. And we're going to repeat that 4 more times. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop. And tension is quite key for the puff stitch. So if you're finding that your loops are looking a bit sort of saggy or different lengths, just try and exaggerate that angle of your hook after you do the yarn over. So I'm going to repeat that 1 more time. Then I'm going to bring the bright lemon to the front of the work. I'm picking up emerald. I'm going to yarn over and pull through all of my loops. So as I said, that little stitch pattern repeat that I've done there, 11 trebles in emerald and then a puff stitch in bright lemon, is our stitch repeat for the rest of the row. So you want to repeat that 6 more times. I've just done mine 1 more time, but once you've done yours 6 more times, meet me back here and we will work through the last part of the round together. When you've worked your last puff stitch in bright lemon, we can cut our yarn. And after you've worked your last puff stitch of the repeat, we should have 7 stitches left to work into. So we're going to work 7 treble in emerald to finish off the row. And your last treble of the row will be into the top of that chain 3. So here's how the work is looking on the back, on the wrong side, after working our 10th row. And here's what it should look like on the front of the work. You can encourage your puff stitches to puff out even more just by giving them a little gentle push behind. So taking a look at the rest of the pattern together, you'll see that rows 11 to 15 are actually a repeat of rows 5 to 9. So if we remind ourselves, row 5 is working a treble in each stitch along. Row 6 was the first row of our V stitches. And then 7, 8 and 9 were these stitches here. Here's one I made earlier. You'll see that we are repeating this section again and stacking it on top. When it comes to row 16, we're doing something very similar. We're just working a treble into each stitch along, but we're also setting ourselves up for the next week. So whereas the stitch count for each row in this week previously has been 98 stitches, if we just take a little look at the pattern for the 16th row in week 2, you'll notice that we want to do a chain 3 and also work 1 treble into the same stitch at the start of the row. And then when we get to the very last stitch of the row, we want to work 2 trebles. So we're basically on the very last row, row 16, we work a treble in each stitch along except for the first and the last one where we're working 2. So that when you finish row 16, you'll have a stitch count of 100 instead of 98 as we did for all the previous rows. So carry on making your panel until you have finished your first emerald panel, and it'll be looking like this but a lot longer, as we talked about. And we want to make 2 of those with sort of an emerald base in this week, and we're also going to make 2 using gentle jade and emerald reversed. So we have detailed that in the pattern for you, but just to note that we're going to have 2 in this colourway and then 2 in our gentle jade colourway. That brings us to the end of week 2 and our Christmas jumper panels with their variety of stitches and techniques. I really hope you've enjoyed working along with me on those, and I can't wait to see all your works in progress. If you haven't yet joined our Facebook group, it's a really lovely place to pick up the Crochet Along conversation and to chat with other makers who are making along at the same time. I'll see you all back here very soon next week for week 3 and our next part of the pattern.